All right, next up, we have a two-parter. We're going to have Natalie Patterson from TLC, the Vice President of Sales and all things Medicare amazingness, and Amanda Brewton, our Miss Medicare, coming up and having an interview talking about, I didn't actually get told what you guys were talking about. So
All the things Natalie.
all things Natalie.
Yeah.
And then we're going to move into a succession planning presentation.
Yes.
Natalie, do you have my
I do. I do have one. We're getting some feedback.
There we go. Hi. So this is Natalie Patterson. This is also, I believe, it's her first time on my stage and her first time where we've actually done anything together.
I know. And that's crazy. We've known each other for so long, and here I am. But
Took it long enough,
you
damn
told me
it.
I was ready, remember?
I did. So I get this call about a decade ago. So most of the agents and the people that come to speak on the stage, I have qualifications that I try to hit so that way you are hearing from people that have been in the industry for a hot minute and have an established track. And we all have different journeys. We all have different varied ways to do this. And I get this call as an Aetna rep, which many of you know. I started out in the industry as an Aetna rep, then went to Anthem rep, and then eventually went out on my own. So I get this call from that chick. And it's like, hi, Amanda, this is Natalie from TLC. And I'm like, uh-huh. And she's got this bubbly personality. And she's like, I just got into the industry and I want to go ahead and would you mind teaching me some of the stuff that you know? And I said, sure, come on. And it has been one hell of a ride. She just became Senior Vice President of TLC. And I could not be more proud of her for that, because to watch her growth from where she started 10 years ago to now is amazing. So how did you get started in this business?
So my mother actually owns a farmer's agency. So I have a passion for insurance and I love PNC, but I wanted to be in nursing, but I cried every day because I just love the patients so much. I can't cry anymore. So I got into insurance. I don't think any of us ever say I want to grow up and become an insurance agent. Did PNC, and my dad worked for Chris and Craig. Not too many people know that. He was an agent for Chris and Craig Vilwalk, and he said, you need to get your accident health license. And I went in and interviewed some guys I know, and I'm like, okay. So, I got my license. I had a daughter she was only 6 months old, and I met Chris Vilwalk at an Applebee's. And they pulled me in. They taught me their ways with Medicare sales, but also I would do part-time as their receptionist. Yes, that's where I started. And I sold on the other side with my baby, who was not even a year old. So that's really how I got into it, and I've learned a lot, and so it's a ride.
And now what do you do?
Well,
what don't you do? But
what don't I do? So now really my main goal is to work with the twins hand in hand as their senior VP. My goal always is growth.
Back up a minute. Talk about what they do. Who is TLC?
So
what does that mean?
TLC Insurance Group is a national FMO NMA. As you know, there's multiple levels. We are very integrated into the individual Medicare, but most of you may have heard about group Medicare and working with employers, groups, and unions. And that's something that Miss Stacy King, who wrote all those apps, can tell you a little bit about the success story behind that. So I've been able to work hand in hand and learn how to not only market in the individual space, but also the group Medicare space. So it's been very rewarding. I also do a lot with growth. I could say when I started TLC, we were in a very small office, and it was probably my second year working there. And we're sitting, I tell a story a lot, so many of you may have heard it, but I'm sitting in, kind of the main office area. And the agent looks at me and says, what if we're part of something much bigger? Because at this time, we probably only had 400 agents. I'm like, yeah, we probably are. Well, that fall, we got our first union deal with the IUECWA, and they exploded from there. And honestly, I could say watching the twins grow is inspiring. You would never think that at that point you could grow so rapidly, but we're at almost 3,000 agents now. So yes, so being able to see Chris and Craig and how they work with the business and them teaching me, and obviously seeing Amanda grow, it can be done. So if you are an agency out there or an agent and you have goals, believe me, you can hit them because we know how to do it. Amanda sure knows how to do it.
So last question, and then I'm actually going to turn the floor over to you so that you can talk about something that everybody wants to know about, which is succession planning. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see agents making?
Not believing in themselves, I would say. I think agents...
I did that.
Yeah. I think agents are too afraid to get out there and get outside of their comfort zone. I was one of those people. Amanda would always tell me, Natalie, you have to take pictures of yourself. You have to do this. And I'm telling you, I see agents do it all the time. The biggest thing that holds you back is yourself. You need to learn how to get out there. I don't like public speaking. I really don't.
But she's doing it.
Here I am. But also, thank you. But the other thing that I really see is thinking outside of the box. You have to think bigger. Sitting as an independent agent, did I ever think that we would be working with some of the top national unions like the IAMAW, who has over 250,000 households? Absolutely not. Do you think Stacey King thought that she was going to write 84 apps in the month of June? Yes, 84. 69 of them were for July 1, but the rest were for August. And she thought outside the box. And I'll tell you a true story. She texted me and Craig and said, I woke up this morning feeling dangerous. Because that's what we tell agents to do. Every morning, you should wake up feeling dangerous. What are you going to do to step outside of your comfort zone to help you grow as an agent and build your business? And Stacey did that. And she landed a huge opportunity to work with a group. So that's the other thing I would say. Do not hold yourself back. Step out of your comfort zone and think big, because that's the biggest way that you're going to help grow your agency. So, as Amanda introduced me, my name is Natalie Patterson. I am the Senior Vice President with TLC. And in my time in working with TLC, I've learned many avenues through the business. I've worked my way up from the secretary to contracting to new business. I don't do commissions. I never want to. But I work a lot with agents nationally. I work a lot with carriers nationally. So I want to pull the room and see, because succession planning is something that's not talked about enough. And it can probably be boring for some of you, but I can promise you after we have this discussion, you'll see why Amanda invited me to speak about this today. So I want to see hands up if you know what succession planning is. Oh, there's many of you. Look at that. So I'm excited that so many people know. All right. Who has a succession plan in place now? Not too many of you. Okay. Show of hands, how many of you know that once you pass away, that your book of business and your renewals die with you? See, many people know that. So what most people do not know is that there is a way to preserve that. I will tell you, me and Craig work with agents every single day. And the worst phone call we get is, did you hear that so-and-so died last night? That's probably one of the worst calls that I get, because we really value our agents and our relationships. And obviously, we want to see all of you last forever, but you don't. So we want to help you prepare for that. So with this, you have to think of succession planning as really a life insurance policy type. Life insurance, you're protecting, it's for end of life, right? Well, this is protecting your book of business. This is protecting your enforced renewals so that your family can continue to receive your income. And not too many people know that this is possible, but I'm going to tell you how next. But I want to give you a little bit of a backstory, because there's also something that people don't know. So you'll see these two handsome guys up here. This is Chris and Craig Vilwalk. So if you've been to ms.medicare before, Craig stands on stage and speaks about group Medicare. if you've been to Medicare Margaritas, Chris was speaking about the wealth side of our business. The reason I have them on the stage is because Craig used to be the chairman of the ARP Medicare Supplement Board. And I heard this story firsthand from the VP of UHC when I was at Medicarians this year. It was nice to see some reminiscing. But I've been told the story about how Chris and Craig were attending a United Healthcare meeting. And in that meeting, they found, just like we talked about, that once you die, your business dies with you. And they work very hard. They're two very successful men, and they've worked hard to provide the lives that they do for their family. So they approached Patrick, the at that time VP of ARP MedSup, and said there has to be something we could do about this. There's no way that we are going to work this hard and then something happens to us tomorrow and our family loses their way of life. So he worked hand in hand, both Chris and Craig, with the VP, and they told them what they would want if they were an agent and what they would want their families to have. United Healthcare, I will say it to anybody, to any carrier, they are the trendsetters. They are. They set the trends, and usually the carriers follow. And they set the trend, and they created a successor program. So, take it a step further. Chris and Craig, always having our agencies and agents in mind, they went to their attorneys, and they set up a succession agreement. That is legal. So if you should pass and you have an executive of your estate or durable power of attorney, they can utilize this to help pass on your business in the way in which you want it to be passed on. So with that being said, they made it for themselves, but they have extended that to all of our agents, even our big agency owners like Amanda Brewton. She can probably tell you how many she's done, and she extends that to all of her downline. And this is at no cost because we want our agents to be able to utilize this to protect themselves, to protect their families. And we share this information also because we're very passionate about it. I am specifically very passionate about this. So why do you need a succession plan? Again, you are protecting your in-force renewals. You're protecting the legacy that you built for your family and your income. So with that being said, you have to position yourself, whereas if something unexpected would happen tomorrow, that your business goes to your partner, your children. Many of you have sons, daughters, family members working with you that can take your business over. And I will tell you, if you do not protect your business and you do not have something in place, your renewals will go right to the carriers. So we want to make sure that you can maintain that. And you really have to start thinking about that as you continue to grow. You may be a large agency now, but don't think it's just for large agencies because there are many of you who started today that will have a large agency in the coming years. So get that in force now, and it will grow with you. So I want to talk about the steps because oftentimes people do not know how to get this started. So first, have a discussion with your upline. Talk to them about what your options are. Maybe they're currently offering a successor program for you. You've worked with that agency, so you want to be sure that you can continue to work with them and coordinate this for the uncertain time. Next, you have to determine the value of your book of business. I am going to cover this here shortly in the upcoming slides, but I will tell you there are so many times people will come in with a spreadsheet, literally of just name, date of birth, and what plan they're on and say, here's all my clients. Doesn't work that way. And I'll talk about how that's calculated soon. Also, you want to identify your beneficiary or beneficiaries, whether that is your spouse or partner, whether it's someone that you're working with. Maybe you work with another agency and you want them to take over their business. That way they can continue to provide that level of service that you currently provide to your clients. I've had some calls from agencies who've received letters or offers to purchase their books because I know a lot of people are trying to retire right now. And I asked them, if you would pass your book on, does it matter to you that that your clients are getting the same level of service that you provide? And it does. So they start the bidding process instead of just going with the first person. And last but not least, you want to talk to your upline about creating an agreement. You have to have an agreement in force. So you can do all the succession planning in the world, but if you do not have a succession agreement, It means nothing. So let's talk about understanding the value of your book. And there's some issues going on with that. It didn't look like that when I sent it over. But so with this, when you're looking at the book of business, yes, I do think it's important to always have a spreadsheet showing what clients you have. That way you can track whether they're still there, maybe they've dropped off due to deceased, whatever the case may be. But also you need to be sure that you have your compensation statements. Now, ideally, we would like to see the last 12 months, but what the compensation statements let us do is we're able to see, are they still in force? Are you still receiving compensation on that? Because a spreadsheet does not tell you that. So that's first and foremost going to tell you the value. Next, you need to know which carriers will transfer your book of business. I will tell you right now, there are 2 carriers that are the easiest. That would be Anthem and United Healthcare. They are so easy to work with, and I have a story about Anthem later. But I will tell you that there are local carriers that will not transfer your book. For example, if you are working in Western PA or in that area, UPMC under no circumstance will transfer your book. So that book is worth 0. I also want to note that in the last 6 months, sadly, I've probably received 4 phone calls about our agents passing, many of which were with Devoted Health. And this was between September and February. So as I'm updating, because at TLC, we do like to keep a running track of what carriers allow the book transfer and what their processes are. So I called Devoted, and they said, we don't do a book transfer, we do AOR. How many of you sent AORs out to clients in the mail? Because I know some agents who do. And how likely are you to get those back if they even receive them in the mail? So we're actually preparing to have a webinar on succession planning, and I'm not afraid to say what I need to say to Devoted. So I told them, I'm going to talk about succession planning with our agents today. They work very hard to build their business. You are one of the fastest growing Medicare Advantage plans in the US. Why don't you have a succession plan? Because I'm going to tell my agents you don't. So me and Craig had many meetings with them, and in 30 days, they had a succession plan right before my webinar. So my reason for saying that is we want to make sure that when we are looking into carriers and the processes that benefit agents, it's great that it benefits our affiliates, but honestly, we care about all of you. We are all out for the same goal, and that's to build and help our seniors, right? So we want you to be able to protect that. So we were very excited about that. So when you're looking at this, when you're doing any kind of, whether it's a book transfer on retirement or succession planning where if you should pass away and you are able to move that book, you can do it in 2 ways. One is a lump sum, which many people really like that. With that, that's averaging about 1.5 to 2.5 times your business of in-force compensation. That is the key, and I'll talk about why here shortly. So in-force. If you're looking at as earned, that's going to be monthly, okay? That's looking at a 4 to 6 year period. We're going to see what remains in force, and again, it's on whatever transfers over and whatever continues to come in. So you're looking at about 50% for 4 to 6 years. Now you keep hearing me say in force what you get paid on. Why do I say this? That is because many of you have been in the business for a very long time. So going to med subs, not all Medicare supplements pay for lifetime. Some are 6 years, some are 8. We have a lot of agents that work with TLC that have very large books of Medicare supplement. So if you were an agent and you were purchasing, wouldn't you want to know, and I'm saying purchasing, I know I'm talking about succession planning, but you have to think of the purchase as well. If you are purchasing, wouldn't you want to know that the plans you're buying or clients you're buying are paying? You want to know that. You also want to know the length, the age, duration. I actually worked with one recently. I'm going to give you examples because I've done a lot of these. The woman comes to me, her husband has cancer, her mom has dementia, and she needs to step away. She says, my friend, I've worked with them, they're going to give me $10,000. I said, okay. How did they come up with that? Well, that's all they can afford. Okay, well, fine. I'm like, all right. I like both people, but I'm a person that I'm non-biased. I am not going to say, yes, you should do it just because I like your upline. I won't do it. So I said, I need you to get me your statements. I am going to give them to Craig, but he's the numbers guy. He's the brains. I just do all the, the back end stuff, the dirty work. So with that, she sends everything over. And honestly, she was at $16,000. Now, $6,000 may not be a lot to some people, but for somebody who is struggling to take care of their husband going through cancer treatments, there is no reason that she should ever settle for $10,000 just because that's all her friend could afford. Okay? So we did send that over. She was able to successfully find somebody to purchase her book. She was very grateful for that. So with that being said, again, when you're going all of it over the book of business evaluation, there's a formula to it. So Craig last week actually broke it down because we've had a lot of business transfers due to retirement lately. And he put it into a formula. He looks at the risk, he looks at the age, and he has everything in a spreadsheet. You put it in and it generates out a book of business cost, which I think is pretty fair because whether you're buying or selling or you're passing away and moving a book on to your family, you want to know that you are getting the value of that book that you worked so hard for. So my point is, don't settle for less than what your book is worth, is what I'm saying. So also, what is a succession agreement? And again, I'm sorry this is messed up. It was not like that before I put it up, so maybe there's some formatting. But so what you can't see there is a succession agreement is an agreement between a licensed agent or agency that essentially will allow another agency to continue your in-force business, whether it's a transfer or a purchase. So again, we do a lot of these. The agent has complete control over this, timing. So you could say, when I pass away, I want my spouse to take this over. Or you could say, okay, well, I've grown a little bit and maybe I'm divorced, so I want to take my spouse out and I want to add my daughter or my son. This could be changed at any time. And also, in the past, a corporation was required, but it's not required any longer. It's all about setup, and I'm going to talk about how to set up your corp. But again, you just have to make sure when you do set up a corp, you have the appropriate beneficiaries in place. So to set up a corporation, you have to make sure always that there's a principal. Typically, it's the owner of a business. If you are an agency that maybe, I deal with this a lot, maybe you're a P&C agency, but you've hired somebody to work your book so you can enjoy a margarita on the beaches of Los Cabos, Mexico, that's fine too. So you can have your corporation in place and appoint a principal. And while you're living, that principal can be transferable so that it doesn't stick. The business will stay with your corporation. So I like to point that out so you can transfer or change whether you're dead or alive. But the titles are important. Why? Because you're breaking down percentages to pass that business on. So let's say you have 100% for yourself, you're the president, and then you have a vice president, your spouse, your partner, your sister, whomever you would want the other 100% to go to. But Craig said to me, if me and Rachel were in an accident tomorrow together and we both passed, we have our daughter set up. So he has Riley 50%, Kaylee 50%. And again, I know that many of you have families. And to pass that business on, I do want to note that your family member must be a licensed and appointed agent to take that over. But I want you to know how that's set up. If they're not, fine. You can work with your upline, they can get that established. But it's important how you have your corporation set up. That way, the succession can transfer down and it doesn't die with your business. So, a couple things to keep in mind. I urge all of you to have a power of attorney, specifically a durable, and an executor of your estate. Why? Because the power of attorney dies with you when you die. And then whenever you need to transfer the business, if you don't have an executor, it takes at least 4 to 6 weeks. I just went through this with a very dear agent of ours. Luckily, we're able to get that through. But again, his license wasn't canceling. So because we helped his wife walk through and get the executor, we were able to get that transferred. So that's very important for all of you. Everyone should have that. Also, do know, why do we need this? Well, because when you're transferring a business for a succession plan, the carriers require forms to be signed. So let's say at death, they're going to want a death certificate. They're going to want to see that the individual signing the forms is the executor of the estate. If it's just that you're incapacitated, they could be durable power of attorney. But all of this information has to be available or they will not transfer the business. So it's important that you have that in place. And I'm going to give you a very good example of that. During COVID, I had an agent in Dayton. He was a very dear friend of mine, and he calls me and he says, Natalie, I have pancreatic cancer. I said, okay. And we had many talks a lot of times. A lot of times he would call me and tell me how I reminded him of Forrest Gump waving to Private Dan on the deck. I don't know why. He just thinks I'm weird. He would call and just say some off-the-wall things. But one day he called me. It was a very different conversation. He was very serious, and he said, Natalie, I've worked very hard for my book. All of his book was Anthem. Let's start there. And he says, I have a son, and he goes to school at Ohio State. And I want to get him licensed, and I want him to take over my book when I pass. And we had a very heartfelt conversation about that. And I didn't worry about him. He was an insurance agent. We all have life insurance. We're all set up, right? He died just a few days later. Very hard. But I come to find out that he had no will. He had no succession plan. He had no life insurance. He had nothing. Luckily, he did have an executor of the estate. It was his son. So I'm like, okay, where do we go from here? So my first call was to Carmen at Anthem. She's the national rep. And I said, this is what's happening. I'm going to send you an email. I want to get account management on this. We need to get this book transferred. I know there's nothing in place, but I'm telling you this is what we want. She said, okay, we need the proof of death, executor of the estate. Fantastic. We have it. Anthem starts to move the book of business because, again, you need relationships. We work very closely with all of our carrier reps. So there was a problem, though. He had 3 different lines of business where he produced. He had TLC, he had Anthem Direct, and he had an agency in Ohio who was another FMO. Anthem was easy. Anthem agreed to send that. But the other FMO, I gave him a call and I said, I need a favor. I said, I need to get this book released. I told him who it was. I told him where we were transferring it to. And this individual was fine. He did not even bat an eye. He said, I'm sending it over. So I get the book of business transfer release form, and it says, XYZ agency agrees to transfer the book of business to TLC Insurance Group. Now, nobody sees a problem with that, but I did. Number one, because I knew this individual was doing me a favor in sending this over. And as an agency, for anybody in here who is an FMO and needs to release business, he was missing one vital important thing. That was all overrides stay with XYZ agency. I could have let it slide. I told Craig, I'm going to call him and I'm going to tell him it's not here, it's missing. It needs to be added. We could have benefited highly from all those overrides. But why am I telling you this? There's a theme here. We have relationship with the carriers, relationship with our agents, and we have relationship with the other FMOs. And I called him and I said, this is what you're missing. He said, Natalie, you did not have to do that, but I will add it and thank you. And that man does favors for me all the time. So what I'm telling you is build your relationships, know who you're working with, but also know the process. That way you can do good business. So all in all, we were able to get everything moved over. So it was a success. I'm glad that his legacy was moved on like he wished, but that's not always the case, I will tell you that. 6 months ago, I did a book of business transfer for another man, and that upline did not agree to move his book of business. So he only moved half of his Anthem business. So reason that I say that is when you're looking at transferring your book, when you're looking at purchasing a book, you have to remember that if you have multiple uplines throughout your appointment with that carrier, it does not mean that that book will transfer for you. You have to know that you can move and that carrier can hold your book of business because your previous upline said, you're not moving. I'm not releasing it. So that's why I always say consider who your contracts are under. Have the conversation. It's very important to align, because when you have multiple and you have one carrier with one agency and they don't want to move it, it can be complicated. I encourage all of them to just have that.
So using that example, is that where the agent was paid by that FMO and basically LOA? Or is it that they were independent and they still were able to do that?
In this circumstance, it was independent. The agent was selling his book of business, and because the book of business was under this upline, that upline said they're not permitted to move that book and sell that book. Now, if you're LOA, I will tell you, you do not own your book of business. So LOA is license only agent. That contract is under an agency. You assign your business to that upline, and you get paid from the upline. Don't ever try to move that. I also heard a horror story last night from somebody when I was talking about this, is that their upline sold a book and included that agent's book of business in that transfer. That upline did get sued and he had to send it back, but that's the conversations we've had when we're networking and speaking about things like this. So I just wanted to make that clear. So again, carefully consider who you're doing business with. I encourage all of you to just always, and Amanda will say it all the time, whenever you're looking for a new FMO, please look at multiple. Please make sure you're interviewing them, and this is a good conversation to have with them. And last but not least, you want to make sure that whomever you're selling your book of business to has the same morals and ethics that you have, because you want to make sure all of you, I'm sure, have great relationships with your clients. And you want to make sure that when you transfer that book, that they are maintaining that same level of support and service, because that's what we all get paid for, right? So again, this is something that we're very passionate about. There is nothing more rewarding than when we get a call and somebody says, my husband passed away, and we say, it's okay, we have something in place and we're going to help you. And we always do. So that is why I wanted to talk about this today, and Amanda asked me to talk to you about this today. Did you have a question, Amanda?
I have one more point to go ahead and make. You mentioned about power of attorneys. The note is, do not do a power of attorney online. You want to be able to do it with a lawyer so that it meets your state regulations, and that there's witnesses and that it's notarized and it's official and all of that. Don't just download some form on the internet and think that that's going to be a legal document that sticks. That's not how this works. It's just like setting up an LLC or anything else like that. You want it to be a traditional document.
Correct, and you make a good point, because we know we've been doing this with book transfers. When you have these agreements, not everyone may have agreement that's legally binding. When we work with our agents, we have a legal document that was drawn up by attorneys, and it's notarized. So if you go to court with that, it's going to be upheld in court if there's, the stipulations are not being met. So I am very thankful to be able to stand in front of all of you. I know this is kind of a morbid topic, but I am very thankful. Oh, Michelle.
So I have a trust,
Mm-hmm.
irrevocable trust, which my business is in. My son is the beneficiary. He is not licensed. I'm a single member LLC. What happens? Do I need to do something different?
He would need to be licensed in order to assume that book of business. So in some of those cases, if it's something, okay, so just to repeat the question, she has an irrevocable trust. Her son is the beneficiary of that. What can she do there? If you need to move a book of business and it's being moved to another individual, that individual must be licensed and appointed with those carriers, and not only just in their resident state. If you have multiple non-res, they have to have that as well. So if he wants, to maintain that, number one, talk to Amanda and set up a succession agreement, and number two, urge him to get his license. So, okay.
If you have a question, please come over here, so I'm not having to run all across the room to make this thing work.
Yes, you're welcome.
I would do it, but Amanda told me what to do, and
Everyone
I
does
don't
what
wanna
Amanda
fight her
says.
today. No. Later, but no.
You're welcome.
Easy question. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
You're welcome.
I'm listening intently. And you put the word corporation up there. Was that to describe an LLC, S Corp, C Corp? Is one better than the other? Thank you.
All of the above. Not one is better than the other, and I believe Amanda said this earlier. Each of you are unique. The way you do your business is unique, so it's not going to matter whether it's LLC, S Corp. It doesn't matter. They're all the same.
Just
As
like you
for this.
shouldn't make a decision of what medication to take based on what medication your friend takes.
Right?
Don't set up your corporate structure for yourself based on someone else's.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Hello, my name is Sonia Chandler, and I'm from New York.
Hi.
Hi. My question is, if you buy a book of business from someone, how do you prevent them from moving the business? Like going behind you and taking them from the plan and, you know, basically just getting the book of business back.
So you're saying if you purchase a book of business from an agency and it moves over, how do you prevent them from taking it back?
Yeah, like how do I stop them from going from Humana to United Healthcare? Like just taking the business back after I bought it from them.
After you purchase a book of business, there are forms that are done. I will point out that I did have an agent who was given a successor agreement with UHC in Texas, and they submitted it before the person passed, and they canceled his United Healthcare appointment, and he lost his book of business, so we're fighting to get that back. But many times, when you send over a successor agreement, for example, with Aetna United Healthcare, that's going to terminate that individual's appointment. So they're not going to be able to move that back. Now, with the other carriers, it typically will not transfer, but as long as you have that paperwork done, that business will move, and as long as the upline gets that moved over. Now, if that person should decide, hey, I want to get licensed, I'm going to start reaching out to my book again because I'm sick of sitting around watching Price is Right and retirement, I would be the one that would not want to retire, and they try to reach out, you can't prevent that. But as long as you get those forms through that are required, that book will move, and there's no problems unless the upline doesn't release it.
If you buy a book from someone, put in place a contract that says they can't touch those clients for X number of
Right.
years.
Hello, my name's Dana.
Hi.
If someone buys a book of business, is it typical for the payout to be in one lump sum, or do you usually break it up? And if you break it up, it would be sometimes for the purpose of making sure you still have retention of the clients that have been transferred over to you.
I don't see one more than another. Honestly, usually when I see a monthly over a period of time, that 50% for 4 to 6 years, depending on how big your book is, that's usually upon retirement. That's when I see that done mostly. The lump sum is typically done at death. And again, this is not required. You can set up any way you want. But the reason that they do lump sum at death is because that book of business does not have the ability to depreciate. You're setting that up, and they're getting that lump sum, and there's no change to that. But you think about when you're going month to month, it's based on what is being paid, the 50%. So if those people, I don't know, let's say there's a big Part D change and everybody starts moving plans, then hey, that book of business is going to slowly diminish. So it's based on what each individual agent feels is going to be best for themselves and their family based on whether it's being, passing away or retirement. You're welcome. Any other questions?
How you doing?
Hi, Renee.
Hi, Renee Russell. If you have a SEP, or an LEC, or an S Corp, and you have it to where you have 40% and your husband has 60% of the business, what do we need to do on something like that?
Well, you have to establish a plan and an agreement to state how you want that divvied out. There's 40-60. So if something, you have to state in SEP agreement that if something should happen to you or your spouse, how that should move on. It's kind of like life insurance. Like if, he passes first, I move it to here. So it's all based on the agreement, how you get that split up, whether it's retirement. But usually it sounds like in your case, if there was an unfortunate circumstance, how that money would be divvied out.
Okay, basically, can you change it then? Because
You can
did
change
that
it.
with-
Your agreement, you can change it at any time.
Okay.
But again, obviously, if, you know,
Was for
some,
tax reasons.
well, I don't know about tax. That's
Well,
not
okay.
something, you want to talk to your accountant about that.
There's a lot of unique situations that people can be in.
Yes.
You always want to make sure you sit down with an attorney and say, this is our end game. This is where we are today. How do we make sure we're set up to get there should the worst happen?
Correct.
All right, just like taxes, everything is unique. Go talk to a professional about it.
Yeah, so everybody's going to have unique situations, and if you have questions, I urge you, we have one more. Hi.
Hi, I'm Cassandra. Just want to clarify, you have that slide up talking about beneficiaries and the breakout. Is that for a succession plan? Is that for naming your beneficiaries with the carrier, or is that for a trust?
You can do it in all circumstances. You should have it narrowed down on who you want. You have to look at all circumstances, because again, we do not know what's going to happen in life. Life can change in 30 seconds at any time. So when you have that set up, that can be based on corp as far as if something happens to you, retirement. But usually when you retire, I mean, I've had somebody say I want 50% to go to my spouse, 25 to this sister, 25 to that sister. So you could really have that set up in any way, and it applies across the board.
Okay, thank you.
And I know you guys are all ready to get to the rhinestone cowgirl. So I will tell you, if you do not have a succession plan set up, I hope you consider it now. And also, if you have questions, you know, obviously we all know Amanda's a genius at all of this and all levels. So please be sure to reach out to her, and obviously I will be around if you have any questions for me. I cannot promise, and I will be one to say, I don't know everything. I'm continuously learning. I listen to those words of Craig and Amanda, you always continue learning. So I don't know all the answers, but if I don't, I will find it for you. So I appreciate all of your time and for allowing me to come up and talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you.